Hey guys, and welcome to another Coffee with Scott. Today, though, I guess you could call it Walking with Scott. But I woke up this morning with a particular scripture on my mind, and I want to talk about a little about this scripture and maybe start a conversation. And maybe this might be a two-part video also. But I think this scripture has a lot to do with where we find ourselves at this moment in time, in this current time that we are living in. And it is Yeshua speaking. And it's in Mark 13. And he's talking about the time of his returning. So I want you to understand that. You have got Yeshua talking about the time of his returning. And it's in verse 37. He says, "And what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch." Yeshua, God in flesh, says to the disciples, and he says, "I'm not just speaking this to you, but I'm saying this to everybody. Watch." And he's going to tell us that no man knows the day nor the hour of his returning. But as he's speaking about his returning, he keeps with this same wording. Watch. Watch. And I believe it's in Matthew 24 when he is speaking of his returning. Listen to what he says. "But know this, that if the goodman of the house had known what watched the thief would come, he would have watched, it would not have suffered the house to be broken into." But I want to go back to Mark real quickly. This word watch. This word watch means to be awake or to be aware. The word used in the Greek is derived from. The root to that word means to arouse out of sleep. And when I was looking at that, my mind went to the 10 virgins. There were virgins. There were 5 wise and 5 foolish. But listen to what it says there. When he's given this parable, he says they all slumbered and slept. They all slumbered and slept, and they were all caught unaware of when the bridegroom comes. So he tells us to watch. To watch. And so in the denomination that I grew up in, they would say that Jesus could come back at any day. He could come back at any hour. He could come back before this service is over. If there were some here walking with me today, they would say that he could come back before we finished this walk. But when you understand the culture of the Bible, the culture that Yeshua, that Jesus practiced and lived in, that you understand that he cannot return just at any moment. When you understand Leviticus 23, and I'm not going to tell you what's in there, you're going to have to go read it for yourself. But when you understand Leviticus 23, you then understand that Jesus cannot return just at any moment. There is a specified moment of his return. The Bible is very clear on the season of his returning. Now, we don't know the day, and we don't know the hour, but we do know the season of his return. As I said, if you understand the culture, and as we have said before, and you all know this, that words mean things. And so the words that he uses tells us the season of his returning. And I just want to kind of share that with you, because in verse 4 of that chapter in Matthew, he says, therefore, be ye also ready. Because remember now, he says, had the goodman of the house had known in what watch the thief was coming, he would have watched. Let me just back up and say, these two words in that scripture that are used for watch mean two totally different things. When he says, had the goodman known in what watch the thief was coming, he would have watched. That word watch, where had he known in what watch, this word alone tells us that the return of Yeshua will be at night. This word alone tells us that in this scripture. Yeshua is saying his return will be at night, because the word used there for in what watch, that word is speaking of a nighttime watching, a nighttime guarding. So the nights were divided up into 3 watches. So Yeshua says, had he known in what watch? So I want to just very strongly establish this for you, that it will be at nighttime when Yeshua comes back. But he says he would have watched for, and I'm paraphrasing, he would have watched for the thief. When Yeshua speaks of his returning, he always uses, for the most part, he uses this analogy of a thief. But now, he's not the only one that uses the analogy of a thief when he speaks of his returning. The Apostle Peter, when in his second letter, I believe, when he speaks of the returning of Yeshua, he uses the analogy of a thief. And Peter also talks about watching when he speaks of the return of Yeshua. When Paul in First Thessalonians, I could have my first and seconds mixed up there. When he speaks of the return of Yeshua, he uses the analogy of a thief. The analogy of a thief. So there is a season. There is a day that is known as, in this culture that Yeshua lived in, this culture that these things were spoken in, this culture that these scriptures were written during, there was a particular season, a particular day that is known as the thief. And the reason it is known as a thief is because no one knows when the day is going to happen. You are told to watch, to look for it, to be looking for it. because it will come as a thief. To find this day, it requires you to get out at night and to look up into the sky and see if you see the sliver of the new moon. So when Yeshua is saying to watch, the apostles and the disciples and those that were around him and heard him speak those words that no man knows the day nor the hour, they knew of what season he was speaking of. We don't know the exact day. We don't know the exact hour, but I can tell you when to be looking for this. So, and we'll talk more about this season in another video. But the one thing that I will say, let me echo Paul. Let me echo Peter. Let me echo Jesus when I tell you to be watching. I'm not saying that he's coming back this year in this season. But what I am going to tell you is that things are lining up very rapidly for this to occur. Other things have got to be set in motion. Other things have got to take place. And unless they happen in the next few weeks, he's not returning during this season. But watch. Watch. Let's look for his returning. Let's watch for his returning. That's what I'm saying today in this video. This word watch, at the root of it, means to not be caught off guard by events or circumstances. You've got to be awake. You've got to be aware. And most importantly, you've got to be watching.